Hi everybody, good afternoon, or sorry, good morning. See, I'm so excited to meet you. My name is Colin. I am a senior lecturer here at the Department of Computer Science in the NUS School of Computing, and I am extremely excited and delighted to have you with us today. Now, before we move on, let me just go through a couple of housekeeping things with you. Now, unfortunately for this session, right, I only have 1 hour with you, so that means that I would probably not be able to answer some of your questions. But don't worry, as you can see, there's going to be quite a few more sessions after this. Now, in particular, right, at 1 p.m. And at 4 p.m., we have sessions with our students together with my fellow professors. Now, these are very interesting sessions where, you can not only interact with my colleagues, but also with people who are currently students. And you can ask them questions, right, to make sure that whatever I tell you, I'm not bluffing you. Okay, so these are our actual students. Now again, at 2:30 p.m., right, we have an alumnus who is joining us. So, if you're interested in finding out more about career opportunities, finding out more about progression for graduates of our programs, right, you can come at this session and talk to her. Okay. Now, of course, you are joining us, so you are on at least one of these platforms here, but we are also on other platforms as well. So, for example, we are on Facebook, we are on Instagram at NUS Computing, as well as you can join us on YouTube at, again, NUS Computing, okay? And these sessions are interactive, so you don't just simply sit there and listen to me talk. We welcome your questions. You can use the live chat function to ask me questions, and that's why this is the Ask Me Anything. In addition to that, right, you can also contact my fellow professors as well as our students on Discord. So for today, right, the Discord is going to be from 10 a.m. until 6 p.m. And for today's session, as I mentioned, we have professors here, so you can ask your questions about things like curriculum. You can ask questions about things like the kind of modules you're going to learn, and also the, burning questions like how difficult are the modules, how busy will I get. Now, we also have our students here as well. And again, you can ask them things like, do they enjoy their life here? Of course they do, right? As well as other things like activities that they take part in, and whether or not their life is just coding, and nothing else, okay? In addition to today's session, we also have 2 more sessions. We have 1 more session on Thursday, 3 more sessions, 4 more sessions, Thursday, 3rd and 4th of March from 12 p.m. to 5 p.m. as well as Saturday to Sunday, 5th and 6th of March from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. Now, for these sessions, right, we'll only have our student ambassadors who will be on Discord. But nonetheless, please do, send in your questions, because I'm sure, right, as you listen, sometimes, you go back, you process it, and you may have things that you want to ask that you didn't think of today. Okay, but have no fear. We will still have our people online on Discord to answer your questions. On Saturday, 5th of March, from 1 to 2 p.m., we have a Zoom webinar with one of my very good friends, Associate Professor Goh Kim Yong, as well as another good friend of mine, Dr. Sharon Tan. They will be telling you a bit more about the new programs here at the NUS School of Computing. Very exciting news as well. Now, we are also on GatherTown. So if you look at the link below, right, you'll be able to have a virtual tour of the School of Computing at GatherTown. And more importantly, there's also a fun game for you to play, okay? So this is going to go from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. Now, what else are we doing on GatherTown? I'm sure many of you know about our very famous Professor Ben Leong. Now, Ben will be there, right, from 2:30 to 3:30 p.m. for you to ask him a lot of questions. Now, those of you him on your NUS Whispers and you've been dying to talk to him live, right? This is your opportunity. And at 10 a.m., 12 p.m., 2 p.m., and 4 p.m. today, we will also have our computing club representatives there who will be telling you more about student life here. Okay, as they are going to tell you, and this is true, life here, right, is not just studying and coding and studying and coding. There's lots and lots of fun activities that you can do in the School of Computing because we truly believe in developing you as a whole person, okay, not just simply academically. Now, to find out more, right, you can go to find out more about things like the admission criteria, application details, fees, and scholarships, you can go to the first link there. This is for the Office of Admissions. If you want to know more about our computing programs, there's the second link there, which is join.com.nus.edu.sg. You can come in here, right, to find out more about the various exciting programs that we have for you. Or if you have a particular question that hasn't been addressed by any of these links, you are very welcome to email us at socug@com.nus.edu.sg. Alrighty, so that's that out of the way. Now I can relax a little bit. As we wait for questions to come in, right, let me just talk a little bit about some of the fun things that you'll be doing, that you can expect to do here at the NUS School of Computing. Now over here, right, this is a remotely piloted vehicle that we call Alex. Now, our students in CG 2111A, Engineering Principles and Practices 2, they actually built this vehicle here as part of their course assessment. Okay, and this thing is kind of really, really cool. Now, this thing is actually, the students actually build it from scratch. So what happens, right, is that when they come in, what they get is just the empty robot chassis and then all of these electronics, okay? So what they have to do, of course, is that they have to put all of this together, they have to wire everything together. But more important than that, right, they will also learn how to program all of this stuff here so that they can actually pilot this remotely. Now, if you look at this, right, there's this little device here that spins round and round. This is a LiDAR. Okay, now what this LiDAR does is that it shoots lasers in a 360-degree fashion, and it is then able to map out the areas around it. Okay, now in this case, right, because we don't have time to teach them how to program this to run fully autonomously, what our students do is that they use the image that is created by the LiDAR, and they will use this to pilot the vehicles, even though they cannot see the vehicles. Again, they cannot see where it is. And we actually put them in a location, right, to ensure, right, that they cannot see what the vehicle is doing. So they have to pilot completely using the LiDAR. Now, what do our students learn from this? Now, first and foremost, right, 2111A builds upon an earlier module, which is 1111A, where they learn things like basic electrical engineering. Okay, now this is, of course, for the computer engineering program. So they learn things like basic electrical engineering. And then when they come to this module, what they do is that they learn, for example, how to program microcontrollers on a low level so that they can run their programs very efficiently. And not only that, if you look at this, there's actually two devices here, two computing devices. Up here, there is a Raspberry Pi. And inside here, which I don't think you can see, there is actually an Arduino. So what they do as well is to connect the Raspberry Pi to the Arduino and then learn how to design communication protocols so that the Pi can control the Arduino, and in turn the Arduino will do things like control the motors as well as various sensors that are here, okay? And of course, the other thing that we do as well is that we teach the students, you can see there's a Wi-Fi adapter here, we teach the students how to connect this to the internet so that they can literally control this vehicle from any part of the world. Okay, that's some of the cool stuff that we do in computer engineering. Now, not only in computer engineering, if you were to look at this thing over here, now this, right, is called Wave. Okay, now this was built by a group of our students for a makeathon, and this is actually meant as a bed for children with cerebral palsy. Now, the key issue with these children is that they are not able to, sometimes they're not able to turn their bodies to sleep in an optimal position or even to do something like to prevent bed sores. So here, what Wave will do is that it will sense their position as well as how long they have been there, and it will actuate all of these plungers over here to push the child's body, right, so that they can move to an optimal lying position to prevent issues like bed sores and muscle aches. Okay, so this is built by our students as well as part of Makeathon. Now, in addition to having all of these things, we also have very good support for you. We have a Makers Lab here where you can come and there are things like 3D printers, laser cutters, CNC mills, as well as test and soldering equipment for you to, if you have an idea, right, you can just go there, you can just go and build whatever you want, okay? We don't put any restrictions as long as you don't break any safety rules, all right? So that's pretty much what I want to share with you about the cool stuff that you can do here. I think now perhaps we can take some of your questions. Okay, so the first one, how much of computer engineering is associated or similar with electrical engineering? Because my father was in electrical engineering and he also worked with transistors for trend programming and telecom networks. Now this, the curriculum, right, is roughly around 50-50 computing as well as electrical engineering. Okay, so it is not purely electrical engineering. And as a result, right, certain topics we may not go that much into. Okay, so things like, for example, power systems, we may not go so much into that. Likewise, also, things like transistors. Now, our students do take a course on transistor electronics, but they may not necessarily go into it at the depth of an electrical engineer. Okay, and likewise as well, right, what our students will do is that they will also take computing modules. So, for example, right, they will take modules in software engineering where they will learn how to design and build software systems. They can also take modules like deep learning and artificial intelligence modules that will help them to build smart systems. Now, ultimately, right, this balance between computing and electrical engineering is really up to you because we have electives that you can take from both computer science and electrical engineering. And what that means is, if you are leaning more towards electrical engineering, you can take more of the EE modules. Like I mentioned power systems just now. If you're interested in that, you can take more of the power systems modules. Or if you're interested, perhaps, right, in things like gaming, you can take more of the gaming modules or the graphics modules that are in computer science. Okay? So to sum up what I've said, it's certainly not pure electrical engineering, all right? Because, I mean, we have an electrical engineering program as well. It's certainly not that. Rather, it is a balance between computer science and electrical engineering. And where you tilt that balance is really going to be up to you. All right? So I hope I've answered your questions. I have a next question, please. May I add a second major during my course of studies under NUS computing instead of indicating my choice of a double major at the application phase? I believe that you can. Okay. Now, the main thing here, right, is, yeah, you can come in and you should be able to actually apply for the second major either through the undergraduate office in NUS computing or through right, you're talking about computing, so through the undergraduate office in computing. I think the main thing here is that, of course, if you're going to take the double major, right, then you're going to have to take 40 credits, right, for your second major. Okay. Would comp science students also get to work on hardware projects? Probably not as part of your formal curriculum, but as I mentioned earlier, we do have a Makers Lab. Now, at the Makers Lab, right, we welcome anybody from the School of Computing, meaning whether you are from CS, computer science, information systems, business analytics, information system security, or obviously computer engineering, you're welcome to use that lab. Now, what do we have in that lab? We have got on loan to you things like microcontroller boards, all right? So we have got Arduinos, we've got Raspberry Pi. If you want something else that's more specialized, you can always ask us, we can consider buying it, okay? Now, we also have other electronics that we have there. So things like sensors, like infrared sensors, ultrasonic sensors, or even this very cool LiDAR that I showed just now. These are things that you can borrow and experiment with. Now, the only thing that we ask of you are two things. Number one, don't build something dangerous, okay? And number two, right, try not to damage it. That's the main thing that we ask of you. Other than that, right, you have full freedom on what you want to do, okay? Now, again, in computing, some of your friends, maybe from computer engineering, you can actually collaborate with them. Now, the other thing that we also encourage in the Makers Lab is interdisciplinary collaboration. Now, I don't just mean collaboration between computer science and computer engineering, okay? That's still within the School of Computing, not so interesting. But if you have friends, for example, in mechanical engineering or chemical engineering, you can actually bring them in and work together with them at the Makers Lab to produce something really fun and cool. And, guess what? As my colleague, Professor Terrence I mentioned just now, we have got very, very good support for entrepreneurship. Okay, so if you guys happen to build something that's very fun and very cool, and you believe that you can be the next C or the next, Google even, right? We have the support for you to try to bring you there. have a next question. May I know the differences between the computer science and information systems programs? Well, the computer science programs, right, they are, focused a bit more about solving real-world problems using things like algorithms, AI and things like that, right? The information systems programs have a bit of a lean more towards the business programs. Okay, so, yeah, so the lean is a bit more towards business. And in terms of that, right, yeah, so you will be learning things like, enterprise systems, a bit more of information systems, decision support systems, things like that over there. Whereas in computer science, right, you'll be actually going more a bit into things like graphics, artificial intelligence, networking, yeah, things like that. Hope that answers your question. How much would I overload each semester if I take computer science with a second major in math? Will my schedule be very busy? Yes, I mean, I wouldn't say you'd be very busy. This really depends on, yourself, right? On how you balance things. Now, even without a second major, okay? So without a second major, right, you'd be expected to work around 50 hours a week on your modules. Yeah, so I guess if you did a second major in math, right, I think that's gonna probably be closer to maybe 60 or 70 hours, okay? I don't know whether you consider that to be very busy. I know people who are quite happy to do that because, they have the passion for it. And I think the main thing here is that if you are thinking of taking a second major, right, I think, be sure that you really, really like what you're doing. And if you are sure that you really like that extra mathematics major that you're taking, right, I think that you're still going to enjoy it. Even though it keeps you occupied and, it kind of burns your weekends, which does tend to happen, I think it's something that you still enjoy. What is the workload like for each semester? Okay, so per semester, right, you will take around 5 to 6 modules. So like, for example, the earlier question, the person wants to take a second major, right, they might have to take couple more modules. So typically, each module is roughly around 10 hours of work a week. Okay, now some modules have a bit more, 12, 14 hours of work a week. Some modules have a bit less. But quite typically, you will be doing around 50 to 60 hours of coursework per week. Yeah, so that's kind of a very typical workload. What are computing professors like as teachers and researchers? I will tell you, we are, well, I shouldn't say we, but my colleagues are really wonderful people. Now let's talk about them as researchers. Now as researchers, right, they have made a lot of impact. So like one of my colleagues who's just like 2 doors down from my office, he has published in journals like Science and Nature. These are like the very, very top scientific journals, right? And also I have colleagues who are, for example, chief editors of very, very major scientific publications. So this is actually recognition, right, of how well they do as researchers. And again, once again, many of my colleagues also win prizes, also win international awards in their research work. So that kind of tells you, right, how good they are. Okay, you can actually go and Google for some of them. For example, Professor Ken Sung or Professor Wee Bing Chin. You can, don't take my word for it, you can Google for these guys, right, and see what they have done and the impact that they've made in the scientific world. Now, in terms of teachers, I would say that my colleagues here, a huge number of them, in fact, I would say most of them are very, very passionate teachers. And if we were to look at our teaching scores, now, something that you may or may not know is that at the end of every semester, you would evaluate us on our teaching. So you would evaluate us, right, in various aspects on a scale of 1 to 5, okay? Hopefully we don't get 1, hopefully we're all closer to 5. And from what I can see, the average score for my colleagues is around about 4.3 to 4.5, which is a phenomenally high score, okay? Out of 5, 4.3 to 4.5. And these are anonymous, honest feedback from our students. And not only that, right, as an added proof of the passion that my colleagues teach with, many of them are on what we call the NUS Teaching Honor Roll. Now, what is the honor roll? You can think of it this way. These are people who keep winning teaching awards every year. And at some point, right, we have a center called Center of Development of Teaching and Learning. At some point, they decide, hey, these guys, right, they keep winning every year, right? Let's try to give other people a chance. So what happens is that these guys get put on an honor roll where they basically will not get awards for a while. okay, so that other people can, can win the awards. That's the kind of teachers that we have here. And, again, later on, you're going to be meeting a couple of our students. You can also ask them. I always like to think of my students not so much as my students, but more like my friends. Okay, or my, younger brother or younger sister. Now, just before we started, right, I was just taking a picture with one of my students. He's actually seated over there. And we were commenting, right? If you want, you can come and say hello to the camera. He's coming here. Hey, hello. As I said, right, I like to think of my students more as, like my friends rather than as my students. And I think we enjoy a very close relationship with them. And it makes things fun, right? I mean, why be so formal and so serious? And at the end, right, we all end up being miserable. There's no point, right? And I also think if you guys are not so intimidated by us, if you can feel that you can trust us and can approach us, you can probably also learn much better. Okay, next question. Are there students in NUS computing? Oh yeah, definitely, definitely. In fact, I very often do get students who come to me and, they'll go, hey, prof, hey, you got project can do together now. I say, yeah, sometimes we have things, right, that we want to do together. So let me just give you an example. One of the things that I'm engaged with right now, together with one of the university officers, is to beautify a tunnel that's in NUS. Okay, so this is a pedestrian tunnel. And what we want to do, right, is that we want to put a feature wall that also plays music and, it also displays some very interesting displays, some very interesting light displays. And the idea here, right, is that what we want to do is that we have something that the students can interact with. So, they can like touch something or push something. And then based on the movements, right, we can do, for example, we can synthesize various music and so on and so forth. Okay, so that's a project I'm involved in. Now, I'm not sure whether I'm supposed to tell you this. I'm allowed to tell you this, but anyway, it's out there. So I've actually asked a couple of my students to work together with me, right, to do this. Okay. Now, if you happen to have an interesting project that you are interested in doing as well, you can also approach your professors and, ask them whether or not they can give you advice. Okay, I've got students who have done that. Now, some of you may not know this. You may be very familiar with this thing called NUS Mods. Okay, now NUS Mods is this place, you can go to NUS Mods. It is this place, right, where you can learn about the details of various modules. You can learn about its what it teaches and, things like the course load. And more importantly, right, you can see the timetable so that you can help to plan your timetable, as well as to see reviews from ex-students of how well these modules are run, okay, how fun these modules are. Now, that was written by one of my students, okay? His name is Yu Beng He. He's now with Google New York. It was actually written by him. And how this whole thing started, right, was that he came up to me and he told me, he said, hey, Prof, I want to do this. Would you like to supervise me? I was like, yeah, okay, this sounds like something that's very worthwhile doing. And what he did then was to actually take it as what we call independent work. Okay, he did it, so he got credit for it. And we supervised it. So we looked through his UI, looked through how this whole thing fits together and all of that, right? And eventually, he produced this NUS Mods that's now been adopted officially by the university and has something like 30 to 40,000 users. That's another example I can tell you of projects that I've been personally involved in with my students. Okay, next. What are the difference in computer science and data science analytics? These are pretty different. Data science and analytics, right, is really more about data literacy, like, for example, understanding how to represent data, understanding how to ingest the data, how to process it, as well as, of course, there's going to be some overlaps, like we have things like machine learning algorithms or statistical algorithms, right, to make sense of data, to make predictions, as well as to detect patterns and things like that. So that is really pretty much the focus for data science and analytics. Okay, so somewhat a bit more towards statistics, somewhat a bit more towards pattern recognition, a bit more towards like regression and prediction and so on and so forth, and focusing, right, on data. Okay, particularly practical aspects of data, for example, data that comes from companies and, advertising campaigns and so on and so forth. Now, computer science, right, it's a kind of a bit broader. Okay, it's kind of a bit broader. So, for example, you can specialize, for example, you may want to, I shouldn't use the word special, but you want to focus, for example, right, in things like machine learning. Okay, you might want to focus a bit more on machine learning. You might want to really go very deep, right, into machine learning algorithms, into various aspects like that. And the other things, of course, that you can also do in computer science, right, are also things like, you know, if you like gaming, right, so you can also go into things like game development and so on and so forth. So it's kind of a bit more general. Yeah, whereas for data science, right, it's really a bit more on understanding data, a bit more on detecting the patterns in data, a bit more on making predictions of that data. And most importantly, I guess, right, is deriving useful insights from that data so that we can make decisions. Actually, I have my data science colleagues around here. I am looking at one right there. Oh, sorry. I should have read the full question. Now, the full question is, what are the differences in curriculum between computer science and data science and analytics? That was the full question. If I enroll in NUS college along with CS and a major in entrepreneurship, how will my day be like? And how will my workload be like per week? Okay, this is kind of a bit of a complicated question. Now, for NUS College, right? NUS College emphasizes a lot on a very well-rounded interdisciplinary experience, all right? And it is a residential experience. So therefore, at night, right, you will be attending courses. There's various things that you need to, activities that you take part in at night, okay? As part of your college experience, as part of your residential experience. Now, so of course, NUS College has its own set of core curriculum that kind of overlaps with some of the core curriculum that you might be taking in CS. So there's some overlap over there. So, you know, it's not going to be like a 200% increase in your workload. There's actually quite a fair bit of overlap there. Now, if you take that, obviously you're going to be a bit busier because, as I said, there's that residential portion where at night you'll be taking courses and, you know, taking part in various activities. So you're going to be quite a bit busier than your normal CS student. Now you take on major in entrepreneurship, right? Yeah, that's probably going to make you really quite busy. Okay, it's probably going to make you really quite busy. What will your workload be like per week? This is again difficult for me to estimate because you are going to need to plan. It depends on how you plan your syllabus over the 4 years. Okay, it depends on how you plan your curriculum over the 4 years. Now, given that your average computer science student does about 50 hours a week, right? I'm shooting for probably something like 70, 80 hours a week. Okay, but again, this is just a rough guess. It's really going to depend a lot on how you plan your modules. Now, what that means, of course, right, is that you should probably, if you want to do this, you should probably sit down with a professor who you can talk to, and then consult him, right? And, you know, try to lay out your modules so that, you know, you don't end up having no life, okay? Now, having said that, one of the really key aspects that I like to emphasize to my students is that we want our students to be well-rounded, okay? We don't want you to be just bookworms, every day, study, don't do anything else, okay? So to that end, right, as I mentioned just now, on GatherTown, you can meet our computing club representatives. You should probably, I would encourage you to take part in a bit more activities to get to know your friends better, as well as perhaps even to serve your community a little bit. I think all of this, right, is really quite important in molding you. So education is not just simply coming here and cramming your day full of modules and then, you know, hoping that at the end you have a degree that looks so good and, you know, you can get a job anywhere, okay? It's also about developing yourself as a well-rounded individual, right? So that's why for this question, what I would advise is that, you know, you should really think very carefully about your end goal, whether or not this is, you know, something that you really want to go into, or whether you want a bit more of a well-rounded experience. And if this is something that you really want to go into, I would advise you to really sit down with someone and, you know, plan through your entire 4 years, right? So that you don't just spend all your time studying, but you also have a bit of time to experience much more of student life. Okay, remember, I don't mean to make you sad, but this is kind of like the last 4 years, right, before you go out and start working. Okay, so yeah, use it wisely. Will there be blockchain modules and quantum computing modules taught at NUS School of Computing? There are blockchain modules in information systems. Yes, there are blockchain modules in information systems. And I think they're kind of cool. Okay, just a bit more, so information systems, I mentioned, there is actually a formal blockchain module where, you learn about blockchain technologies, you learn about programming blockchains, and of course, blockchain applications, or what we like to say, right, rather than saying blockchains, right, we very often like to use the word distributed ledger, okay? Now, of course, the reason why we kind of, personally, I prefer the name distributed ledger because it's kind of a bit more accurate, right, description of what a blockchain does, which is a way to distributively store information that cannot be tampered with, all right? So, I kind of prefer that definition. Whereas blockchain, right, somehow or other tends to be tied in with things like Bitcoin, okay? On a slightly less formal level, I actually do teach a course where I run a 3-hour workshop on blockchains. And in that case, right, for that, what I focus on a bit more is a bit more on the technology underlying blockchain. So things like, public key cryptography, digital signatures, mathematical hashes, things like that. Yeah, so I do have a 3-hour workshop that I run in one of my modules. Okay, for quantum computing, this I'm not really sure. I'm not sure whether my colleagues know about this. Quantum computing? I guess not, right? Quantum computing. Okay, I think you asked on the Discord. Yeah, I think you asked on the Discord. Oh, I wish you could see this. I've got my colleagues and a lot of our students over in front of me, right, answering your questions. So you can ask on Discord. How many students take a double degree in mathematics and computer science each year? Now, unfortunately, I don't have the numbers for this, but I do know of a few. Okay, I do know of a few. Personally, I know about 3 of them. 30. Okay. I just got the answer. We have 30 students who are taking it. Right. I personally know around 3 of them. Yeah. And in fact, they're my teaching assistants. So that's kind of a cool thing. So yeah, it's about 30 a year. What are some of the career prospects for undergrads at NUS Computing? There's tons of career prospects. Something like 99 point something percent of the recent survey, right, shows that around 99+% of our students get jobs within 3 months. Okay, very good prospects. Now again, the particular roles, right, are really going to depend a lot on perhaps the program that you take. Okay, so if you are taking the information system security program, for example, you can do things like digital forensics. You can do things like, for example, security, banking security, right? Of course, we know recently one of our local banks had a bit of a problem. So you can join teams like that to look into ways to secure banking. Okay, there's a lot of demand for this. There's also quite a bit of other things that you can do. Okay, yeah, so regarding the earlier question about quantum computing, we indeed do have a class. We have CS 4268 quantum computing. So yes, there is really a class on quantum computing here. Okay, sorry about that. Now coming back to the career prospects. Well, information systems, for example, for information systems, right, you also have got, again, careers in banking, careers in businesses that look towards deploying infrastructure within the businesses, right, as systems architects and so on and so forth. So these are some of the things that you can look into. And again, for like computer science, depending on what you study, there are of course things that you can do, a lot of stuff that you can do out there, right? So for example, if you love gaming, you can take up our modules that are more related to gaming, and we also have companies out there who would very happily employ you, right? And of course, computer engineering is the same thing as well. And in general, right, as my colleague, Professor Darren has mentioned just now, people like Google and Facebook, they are very, very well aware of us, right? They're very well aware of us. Lots and lots of my former students work in places like Facebook, Google, Microsoft, and locally they work in places like Shopee and so on and so forth, right? So there's tons and tons of prospects for you out there. It's not going to be a problem anytime soon. Can past graduates join in your workshop? You can write to me and see. I normally run this. I normally run this workshop as part of one of my graduate level modules, and normally it's run around mid to late December. Okay, so you can write in to me. It's normally run about mid December, so you can write to me and ask. Okay. What is the difference between a com science major curriculum versus I don't think you can study com science as part of a com engineering major. It doesn't make sense, okay? And I'll explain why. Now, in computer engineering is co-hosted by the School of Computing and by the Department of Computer Science and the Department of Electrical and Computer Engineering. And typically speaking, whatever electives are offered to our own computing students are also offered to the computer engineering students. So in that sense, right, it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense for you to take a com science as part of a computer engineering major. That doesn't make a lot of sense, and I believe you can't do that anyway. So rather, what you can do is that if you're interested, for example, in working with hardware as well as software, right? Like if you want to build cool stuff like the stuff I showed you just now, you might want to take up computer engineering. And then when it comes to choosing your electives in the third and fourth year, you can actually take more of the computer science electives, right? If that is what you want, right? But again, you come in, you never know, right? Because as I've said, we are co-hosted between Department of Computer Science and Electrical and Computer Engineering. You might actually look at the ECE modules and go like, oh wow, this is really cool. I want to learn more about how to about the hardware behind computer networks, and you might want to lean a bit more towards that, right? Yeah. Now, on the other hand, if you kind of prefer more of the software aspect of things, more about writing software to solve real-world problems, then you might want to go into computer science. And then again, as I mentioned just now, right, you're in computer science, there are options not formal options, but informal options within the School of Computing for you to go into hardware. And that's where things like the Makers Lab comes in. And that's again where, having computer engineering also being hosted by the School of Computing is very advantageous, because you can meet up with the computer engineering students, learn a bit from them, and work together with them, right, to build some really cool stuff and gain some experience. But again, as I mentioned, right, it will be a bit more informal. How fast is the programming learning pace in NUS CS if a person does not have any programming background? Good news, I've got good news for you. I think most of our students don't have any programming background, all right? And this is something that we really take into account when we're teaching you. Now, how fast is the pace of programming? I would say that in NUS in general, the pace of everything is fast, okay? I remember when I was a freshman, when I came in, right, one of the very first professors I met, who's now a good friend of mine, Professor Yong Hon Wai, he said to us that when you come to university, it's kind of, the information kind of comes towards you, right, like a tidal wave or like a wall, right? It's just a lot of information that comes to you at the same time, and a lot of project work that comes to you at the same time, right? Now, I don't mean to discourage any of you. This is going to be true of just about any university program that you take. But the good thing about this is that you do learn, you adapt, right? And you do kind of, you do adapt, and when you come out of here, right, you're actually able to learn very, very quickly. Okay, you're able to learn very quickly. You're able to also differentiate between what's important to know and what's not so important to know. And yeah, it's something that's really very good for you. Now, my main point is this. No matter whether you have computing program or no, whether you have programming experience or no programming experience, it's going to be quite a bit to take in, all right? But don't worry, because number one, you have lots and lots of very good friends that you can work with, all right? You come here, you make friends, right? You work together with them, solve problems together with them, okay? But don't copy from each other, okay? But you solve problems together with them. And through that process, right, you're really going to form a lot of very good friendships. So that's the first thing. Now, the second thing is, and this is something that I always tell my students as well, don't be afraid to talk to your professors. All right, so if you are finding difficulty, look for your professor, discuss with your professor how you can deal with it. Okay, now at the end, right, based on my own experience, because I've taught quite a bit of programming modules, based on my own experience, most of our students will be fine. Okay, most of our students will be fine. Towards the end of at the beginning, they're going to find it really difficult, but probably towards the end of the first year, the start of the second year, right, eventually they will adapt, as I mentioned just now, and they do well. All right, so don't worry too much about it. Next question. Yes, internships. Sorry, I should read the whole question out. Are internships at NUS Computing compulsory? Yes, they are. All right, they are. And these internships, we view them as an extremely important part of your learning experience because at the end, right, we don't want to produce students who go out there and have no idea, even if they come up with really great results and know every single thing about the modules they learn. Uh, there's much more to working life than just simply your technical knowledge. You know, you have to know how to interact with your colleagues, you have to know how to work within teams and so on and so forth. And we feel that internships are a really, really good way for you to experience this. And in any case as well, right, very often what happens in internships is that our host companies are so impressed by our graduates that as soon as they get out, these host companies grab them to work with them. Right? So it's a win-win for all of you. Okay. So yes, in short, it is compulsory, but it's something that's to your advantage. Will I be able to change my major from computer science to information systems or to another computer? Will I be able to change my major from computer science to information systems or to any other computing majors at any time during my program? You can apply to the computing undergraduate office to do it, but whether or not the switch is successful is something that I cannot guarantee. All right. So, for example, we will, when you apply for something like this, we actually look at a lot of things. So we look at your current performance, we look at your motivation for changing programs, and also we look at things like your potential to do well in this new program that you are trying to switch to. Okay, so you can switch, yes. You can do it by applying at our undergraduate office, but I would say that that switch is not guaranteed. Okay. Will Poly students be at a better advantage to cope with the subjects at NUS computing versus JC students? Potentially in the first 1 or 2 semesters, all right? So potentially in the first 1 or 2 semesters, because you may have a bit more programming experience, particularly if you come from those programs like the media program at Nanyang Poly or any of those programs, where there's a fair bit of computing work before you come in, potentially you have some advantage in the first maybe 1 or 2 semesters. But I would say that towards the 3rd semester onwards, right, it kind of levels off and all of you would be more or less on a level playing field. Okay. Now, even when I'm talking about the first 2 semesters, right, I'm using the word potentially. Okay, because at the end, it's really going to be a lot about how you have learned in Poly, as well as in addition to the work that you've done in Poly, right, perhaps even additional work that you have done outside of that. Okay. Okay, next question. What kind of research is being conducted in the field of computer science? What are some of the upcoming technologies we should look out for? A fair bit of research, right? Fair bit of research. So, like, we have colleagues, for example, in deep learning. And in fact, also, just last week, I was touring this robotics lab, you know, and we actually do have a robotics lab downstairs. It's called the Robot Living Studio. And it's kind of cool. So amongst the things that they're working with, right, include things like robots that you, just by using a camera, they can like figure out how to pick up objects and how to interact with objects, okay? Now, this may not sound like a very complex problem to you because as humans, we are extremely good at doing that. Okay, so for example, right, I'm vaguely aware that I have Alex over here and I can just, without looking, pick him up and show him to you, all right? Now, as humans, we are extremely good at doing that. But for robots to do that, it's something that is really quite difficult because if you think about it from a programming perspective, right, you have to actually tell it, you know, all the little micro movements it has to make in order to acquire the object, close the pincer, pick it up, okay? Now, to get it to do it autonomously using just a camera is even harder, okay? So that's some of the stuff that my colleagues over at the Robot Living Studio are working on. Yeah, of course, you know, other things like autonomous vehicles and things like that, right? These are some of the things that, you know, people here are looking at as well. Okay. Okay. Is it possible to learn and specialize in machine learning as a computer engineering major? Now, in terms of the formal word specialization, okay, computer engineering has got 2 specializations. The first specialization is Internet of Things, all right? So there you learn how to build, you know, sensors and how to marshal the data from the sensors and apply deep learning to gain insights from the sensor data. We also have a robotics specialization. All right, so these are the two specializations that we have in computer engineering. Now, in addition to that, right, there are also some focus areas as well that you can take there. Now, the difference between a specialization and a focus area is that a focus area is more informal. All right, so one of them is intelligent systems. So in intelligent systems, right, you can actually go a bit more into machine learning. Now, what you have to do in this case, right, is actually to take a certain number of modules. So you'll be taking the modules from the elective modules that are more towards deep learning and machine learning. So if you take, I think it's 7 modules. If you take 7 modules there, right, you can then, consider it to be your focus area. Okay. So in other words, we don't have a formal specialization for machine learning and computer engineering, but what you can do is that you can take it as a focus area. All right. Okay, next. Since SOC has been increasing its intake, how does it ensure that it has sufficient resources for each student and maintains a good faculty to student ratio? Well, one of the things that we've definitely been doing is that we've been recruiting quite aggressively. Okay, we've been recruiting faculty members quite aggressively. I think in the past year, right, I've interviewed at least seven to 8 people, and sometime next week I'll also be interviewing someone again. Okay, so we are really recruiting people very aggressively. Now, in addition to that, right, in addition to the faculty members, we also employ very, very good teaching assistants. Okay, very good teaching assistants. And these are the people that, you can probably relate best to, because these are people who are around your age group. All right, so you can relate very well to them. And when we recruit them, we interview them, we make sure that they are very good teachers, we make sure that they can teach well, as well as we also have a minimum standard, right, that we normally set in recruiting these teaching assistants. Okay, so for example, for my courses, typically I would take teaching assistants who score at least an A or A+ in the module, and then we would sit down for a one-to-one interview to make sure that they can teach. Right. Now, by doing things like recruiting new faculty members aggressively, as well as relying on teaching assistants who we know are very, very good, we can actually maintain a good teacher-to-student ratio to ensure that you learn well. Now, that's one thing. Now, the other thing, of course, right, is that we also employ various technologies to help in your learning. When we teach, it's not just, sit down and listen to our lectures, right? Now, we also employ things like various tools in places like Zoom, and also things Piazza, okay, tools like Piazza, as well as our own in-house archipelago. We make use of tools like this to ensure that you remain engaged with us as we teach, even as we are teaching online. Okay, hope that answers your question. Yan Ping says, hi, Prof. Colin. Hi, Yan Ping, good to see you. See, I told you, right, we're all good friends. That's it? Oh, okay. So it seems like you guys have no more questions. So either I've done a really, really good job answering your questions, or, you guys went like, oh, you know what, I think I'm going to wait for the next guy and start asking questions. Okay, now, anyway, it seems like I still have around 13 minutes to go. So, yeah, maybe I'll just talk a bit more about the School of Computing, right? So as you might have heard from my colleagues' talks just now, we have really quite a bit of very exciting programs for you, right? We have 5 degree programs. We have computer science, information systems, computer engineering, business analytics, information system security. Now, it's quite hard work to be here, right? It's quite hard work to be here. As I said, your typical work week is going to be like 50 hours. It might be slightly a bit more than that because of things like project work and so on and so forth. But, I think that this is something that is really worthwhile that you can undertake. Okay, something that's really, really worthwhile for many, many reasons. Number one is that it really helps you to deal with stress. It really helps you to learn how to cope with stress. Okay, it really helps you to learn how to cope with stress. It helps you to learn how to manage your time well. All right. And we have this thing called the principle of shared suffering. Okay, so the principle of shared suffering basically means that when you have a group of people that you spend a lot of time with, solving problems and basically suffering through something, you become very, very close friends, right? And these are people who are going to be your very good friends probably for life. Now, I've got people who I have enjoyed suffering with way back when I was a student in the 90s. Until today, we're still good friends. You know, we talk on Facebook. You know, we meet up once in a while. Yeah, it's something that you really gain a lot from here. Okay, so I think that, yeah, it's a lot of hard work, but I think it's going to be something that's worthwhile for you. Okay. Now, of course, there are other things that you might be curious about. For example, I'll just keep talking until you have another question. Now, for example, you might be curious, right? Like there was this question earlier on in Professor Terence Sim's session. There's so much free stuff I can learn online. Why should I pay you, well, for Singaporeans anyway, why should I pay you 8,000 plus a year to come and learn? Now, there's again many reasons that I can give to you for that. Okay, now one of them, of course, is that as my colleague Terence has said just now, here you have a formal planned curriculum, and our curriculum is not created in a vacuum. All right, we have an advisory board that is made up of senior members of industry who tell us what they need, and based on the input from our advisory board, you know, we really do take that advice very seriously and plan our curriculum very seriously. Okay, now for that reason, when you graduate, you almost certainly are going to have everything you need to do well in your career. Whereas if you're learning this online, it's going to be very difficult for you to put together a curriculum that you can follow in order to have that same knowledge. Now, why is it difficult? Now, first of all, right, learning what to put in the curriculum is probably not that difficult, all right? So like, for example, if you come to our website, you can see exactly what we teach our students. You can even find the textbooks that we use to teach our students, okay? Oh, we have a question, great. So I can stop talking. Are there modules in computer science that expose students to game development or immersive technologies, and how in depth are they? Yes, we do. We do have game development modules, and they do go very well in depth. One of my very good friends also, right, Anand, one of my very good friends, Anand Bojan, he's very well known for his use of the Oculus, right? He's very well known for his use of Oculus. And if you come by, so what happens is that his students will develop, you know, various cool software and all of that to use on the Oculus Rift. And sometimes you'll come by around about, I think, I'm trying to remember, around November. Okay, you'll come by around November. Hopefully by then the COVID rules will have been relaxed by then. Now, around November, we have this event that we call STEPS, okay, where our students showcase their projects. And you can see quite a few of them, right, would be showcasing these Oculus Rift projects. Okay, so it's kind of very cool, immersive. Now, you also see some of the games, right, that his students develop. And I myself have seen them, and I think that they're really quite awesome. Given a bit more time and a bit more financial support and so on and so forth, and a bit more manpower, they can certainly be games, right, that you'd be very happy to pay money and download and play with. Okay. What kind of programming languages do we learn in computer science and computer engineering? Computer science, you learn JavaScript. Okay, well, actually not entirely JavaScript, but a restricted subset of JavaScript that we call source. And you can actually find the textbook online. Okay, so you can write to us and we can give you a link for the textbook. So it's a restricted version of JavaScript known as source. Computer engineering, you'll be learning C. Now, you may be wondering, right, why of all things C? Okay, C, some of you might know, is kind of a very painful language. Now, the reason why we teach C in computer engineering is because C is one of the very few languages that lets you really go all the way down to the hardware level. Okay, really goes all the way on the hardware level. Now, as I was mentioning just now, I was talking about Engineering Principles and Practices 2, CG 211A. We use C for that module as well, and because by using C, we are able to manipulate the hardware directly without having to go through an operating system. And therefore, we can create systems that are very responsive and fast. Okay, so that's why C. Next question. How does SOC keep its curriculum up to date with rapid advancement in the technological world? Well, one of the reasons why we are able to do this is because, as I mentioned just now, my colleagues here are not just great teachers, they're also great researchers. So they are people who are really at the cutting edge of research. All right, they're people really at the cutting edge of research. Now, in addition to that, as I mentioned also, we have very close relationship with the industry. So our industrial contacts, right, they tell us, you know, things that they need. And of course, you know, we don't just blindly follow them. We look at their requirements, we look at their needs, and then we again take a holistic view of your education to decide, right, how to mold the curriculum. Okay, how to mold the curriculum. Now, one of the things that we have done, there is actually a new curriculum structure that's coming up. I won't talk about it too much, but there's a new curriculum structure that's coming up that gives you a bit more flexibility in terms of interdisciplinary programs. And one of the reasons why we're doing that is because we have learned from the industry that you can't, nowadays our graduates, right, they cannot just be very, very specialized in one thing and not know other things. So in that sense, this interdisciplinary knowledge is really important, and that's why we've modified our curriculum as well to take that into account. Okay. How many students, will students have to do many group projects at NUS Computing, or is it mostly solo assignments? Now, I don't know if you'd be happy to hear this, but I will be very happy to tell you that it is mostly group projects. Okay, now of course there are some solo assignments, right? So for the module I'm currently teaching, operating systems, you have a choice of doing it in a group or you have a choice of doing it solo, it's up to you. But in general, most of the projects are going to be group projects. Now, why do we do that? There's a few reasons. One of them, right, is that if you work in a group, we can give you much more interesting projects. So for example, coming back to Alex, okay? Now, if this was to be built by one student, it's just going to be too much, especially given that you can only have around maybe 4 to 5 weeks to put Alex together, all right? Now, it doesn't look that complicated, but believe me, right, trying to get his LiDAR to give you information so that you can map out everything and then make decisions on the Raspberry Pi, communicate those decisions to the Arduino, and then those decisions then send commands to the motors. For one person to do all of that, right, it's very, very difficult. Okay, so one of the reasons why we get you to do group work is because then you can get much more interesting projects done. But the second, and I feel perhaps the most important reason for putting you in groups, is that it helps you to learn how to interact with people. It helps you to learn how to work with people. And sometimes, right, you can have really a lot of challenges in terms of group work. So for example, some of your group mates may have a lot of other commitments, and you'll find, right, it can be quite challenging to schedule with them. Sometimes you have personality conflicts. One person likes to do things in one way, the other person likes to do things another way, and then you guys cannot agree, right, and then you have conflicts. Okay, now these things do happen. They sound very scary, but they are also opportunities for you to learn and to grow. Now, why is this learning and growing so important? Why can't I just work alone in a corner, right, and finish all of my projects? Unfortunately, well, you can do that if you plan to stay in the School of Computing forever and never graduate. But I'm sure all of you plan to graduate and plan to get jobs. Now, when you get jobs and you start working, you face exactly the same problems. You cannot choose your teammates. You end up working with people whose personality conflict with you. You end up working with people who you feel are not doing anything at all. And you have to learn how to manage this. Now, it's much better for you to learn it now, where your salary and your promotion are not on the line, than for you to go out into the industry and learn it there. So that's why, right, we do have mostly group work. How should we prepare for comp science? Okay, I've got only one last minute, so I'm gonna just take this last question. I would say one of the things that you can do is to really go online. Probably the biggest obstacle for many people in the first year is probably going to be the coding part of it. Okay, now computer science is not all coding. There's lots of other stuff, but in the first year, this is probably going to be one of the somewhat bigger obstacles. Now, one of the things that you can do is, yeah, go online, learn JavaScript. Since you're talking about computer science, learn JavaScript. And I think to make it fun, right, challenge yourself, build something. You know, build a web service, build your own blogging software, whatever. You know, go and build something that's fun, or take up, maybe learn a bit of hardware, build your own Internet of Things solution. Make it fun, and at the same time, you'll acquire knowledge and level up. Now, believe me, just learning from the website and, you know, monkey see, monkey do, type from whatever the website tells you, it doesn't help you. You really have to go and find something fun to do and really challenge yourself, right? And then there you really level up and grow. And when you come in, it's going to give you a very good experience. Okay. Now, I think the other major thing is going to be a bit of mathematics. Discrete mathematics, one of my favorite modules, I teach that. Okay, yeah, this is something also you can kind of get the whole materials online and go through it. It's really a lot of fun. Okay, is that all the questions we have? All right, so that's all the time we have. I've been very happy to have you here with me. I hope my answers have been useful to you. Now, again, these are our social media our various social media contact points. So at Facebook, we have at NUS School of Computing, at NUS Computing on Instagram, and NUS Computing on YouTube. Now, we also have our Discord. Don't forget about our Discord, right? So we have it today with our professors and students, tomorrow, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday with our students. And you can go to join.com.nus.edu.sg to find out about our programs. And if there's stuff that you are dying to know and you can't find out from any of these places, you can always email us at SOCUG. Okay, so thank you very much, everybody, and have a great week ahead. Bye.